All right, let's look at a couple of the checkup practice problems. And like I said, we are going to skip the division ones. We are not going to worry about these. They are a Math 3 topic. So let's just look at these. All right, when we get the square root of a negative, we're now going to break this up into the square root of 121 or positive 121, and we're going to break out the square root of negative 1, which we now know by definition that the square root of negative 1 is equal to I, imaginary letter I. So the square root of 121 is 11, and the square root of negative 1 is I, so my answer here is just going to be 11I, the imaginary number. Over here, let's break apart. Root 18 could be rewritten as positive 18 times the square root of negative 1. But remember that root 18 could be rewritten as the square root of 9 times the square root of 2 and then times the square root of negative 1. Well, the square root of 9 is plus or minus 3. And the square root of negative 1 is I. And the square root of 2, nothing can happen with that, so we just leave it underneath. So this one would be a simplified radical of plus or minus 3I root 2. This one over here is also plus or minus 11I. For these, simplify the expression as much as possible. So if you look at how we can break down the I root 17, it's going to be a whole bunch of I to the fourths. So like I to the fourth, I to the fourth, that would make 8. I to the fourth, that would make 12. I to the fourth, that would make 16. And then just a little tiny individual I. Why did we break it up into all these I to the fourths? Because by definition from the table in our study guide, we know that I to the fourth just equals 1. So it's like saying 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times I. So my answer is just I. I to the 83rd could be broken down as I to the fourth to the 20th power. It's a lot of I to the fourths to write out, so we could simplify it like this, because 4 times 20 is 80, and then times I to the third. And I to the fourth is just 1. 1 to the 20th power is just 1. And I to the third, by that chart, by definition, is just negative I. So 1 times negative I is just negative I. All right, for these ones, we're adding or combining like terms, then we're subtracting to combine like terms, and then we're doing the FOIL. So we go 2 plus 4, combine like terms to get 6. 3I plus 6I, combine like terms to get 9I. I'm done, 6 plus 9I. Here we have to remember that this negative changes all the signs at the back. So the front stays the same, 5 minus 2I minus 3 minus 4I. And now we combine like terms of 5 minus 3 equals 2, and negative 2I minus 4I is negative 6I. Final answer is just 2 minus 6I. The 6 is the real part. The 9I is the imaginary part. This whole thing is called a complex number. The 2 is the real part. The negative 6I is the imaginary part. The whole thing is called a complex number. On this next one, we're going to FOIL. First times first, outer times outer, inner times inner, last times last. If you look over here and see all this work, your final answer should come in at negative 7 plus 22I. For this one, first of all, there's a little tiny I missing, plus 3I at the end, so I'm going to just write in a little I here. And then we go first times first, outer times outer, inner times inner, last times last. And once you simplify that whole thing, you should get 9 plus 7I. So just so you can see these two right here in their full form of what would multiply and what would come out, you could pause it on the screen if you need to. Those of you that really are anxious to figure out how to divide, this is the Math 3 topic that I'm skipping, and you multiply the numerator and the denominator by the conjugate of the denominator. So if the denominator is a 4 plus 5i, we're going to multiply by 4 minus 5i to the top and bottom. And that's essentially like multiplying something by 1, the same thing over itself. And we do that so that we can simplify this all the way out to this answer. Again, you do not need to do number 9 and 10, but for those of you that wanted to see it, there it is. So this answer for number 8 from this work over here is just 9 plus 7i. And again, we're not doing numbers 9 and 10.